the close-ended questions are not the best ones to ask. You might have clients who feel the same way. It's like, I don't like the way I look, or I'm very self-conscious, or it's just uncomfortable that I'm talking while I'm watching you talk. Let's start with our 11 coaching skills. And the first one is asking questions. You remember, guys, I told you in one of the other conversations we had that a lot of what we do is asking questions. It's also offering conversations and responding to things. We'll talk about responding as a different skill. But the first one is asking questions. And there are two types of questions. There are the close-ended questions and the open-ended questions. And the importance in understanding the difference is that a close-ended question makes the other person respond yes or no. Meaning, a person shares about an argument they had with their husband, and you tell them, did that bother you? That's a close-ended question, because they'll say, yeah, that bothered me, or no, that didn't bother me. But you don't allow for more conversation. It's like you ask this and then, I mean, it's fine to ask that question. I'm not saying it's not, but you close the conversation closed right away. Then you got to ask something else. So there's limited options for answers, and it kind of stops the conversation. So not your ideal questions to ask. So when you ask questions, the close-ended questions are not the best ones to ask. The open-ended questions are those who really open up the opportunity to explore the topic further. And it invites the client to provide an answer that makes them think a little bit about it. So instead of, did that bother you that he said this to you? How did you feel when you were having this conversation or argument with your husband? What did you think? What was going through your mind? Tell me more about this. All right. Number 2 is the eye contact. So I know it's interesting because when we're on Zoom, the other person doesn't know if you're looking at them. Now, you also want to look at your client's style of eye contact. Some are not comfortable with it. So they might be talking to you as they're looking away. They might not feel comfortable looking at themselves on camera to begin with. You might have clients who feel the same way. It's like, I don't like the way I look, or I'm very self-conscious, or it's just uncomfortable that I'm talking while I'm watching me talk, right? Because when we normally talk, like, we don't see ourselves talk. So there's an extra layer to it here. So notice how your client is. Are they making eye contact with you on camera or in person down the line if you do this in person? Or are they looking away as they talk? Culturally, be mindful. There's cultures who, and we learned that in my psychotherapy training, to not think that eye contact is for everyone, and to respect other cultures. There are some cultures who is a disrespect to be looking at you when you talk, right? So I don't want to mention the cultures because things shift, and I haven't, like, it's something that you're gonna get to see because people are, there's second generation, third generation, so there might be different. So feel into it, right? And they might, when you talk, they might look down. So don't take offense to that. Learn their style. And there's others who completely look at you like that. And there's others who are like, processing. So many different styles. you want to be very consistent with your eye contact and the nodding, right? And stuff. All right. Third skill, tone of voice. So it's your tone of voice and the client's tone of voice. So what I have found in my experience is sometimes, and being Greek myself, in speaking at times, especially in the early years, before I learned the culture better, um, I would interpret a certain tone of voice as them being feeling a certain way, right? Or I would have a tone of voice that the other person maybe couldn't quite understand. Yet it's not always the words that we say, because if I say something, I can't remember specific examples from the past, but I do remember that was it became a couple times I noticed that as I wasn't sure what, because they would be really happy but they were saying something sad, and that is not necessarily cultural. That's a person who's not in touch with their feelings. So you might see that where they're sharing with you, and that actually I see this a lot with people, especially when they're having depression or they're having um they're very disconnected from their selves. They will tell you something as though it's matter of fact, like the tone of voice is very very like there's no emotion to it, but what they're saying is really negative. So you want to pay attention to that, and also notice when somebody's saying something funny, sarcastic, but they're actually saying something serious. Okay, there are people who will hide the severity of what's happening or something going on, that it will hide under a joke. It's a coping mechanism. It's gotten them through tough times. It's gotten them through things that are going on that they wouldn't have been able to get through. So it's a good thing. It's a skill they've gotten. Yet when we are in a group setting, right, and it's not only a skill, it can help in situations. It can help dispel the intensity many times. Yet in a situation where it's the person's time to heal, it's the person's time to process something, we want to see what's under their joking tone of voice, because they could like hear what they're saying, hear what they're saying. They could be saying it as though it's nothing. They could be saying it as though it's a complete joke, and then hear the undercurrent. Okay, next one, active listening. Yeah, fourth, exactly. Active listening. A lot of people wait to speak instead of listening. We wait to speak instead of listening. Um, Listening is going to be one of your biggest skills, because that's also going to lead you to intuition, which intuition is the 11th skill. I'm saying that already because I've been talking about it already. Um, but listening, truly listening, will allow you to also tap into intuition. Because if you're not thinking of what I'm going to say, because if I'm thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? I'm blocking intuition. When I stop thinking what I'm going to say, intuition, I'm allowing intuition to come through. Same thing when we block our higher self, right? When the ego comes in, it blocks the higher self. The ego wants to say something back to the person, is thinking what they're going to say. That blocks the higher self. That blocks intuition. There's 3 types of active listening. First type is repeating. Second is paraphrasing. Third is reflecting. Repeating is where you actually are repeating the exact same words that your client said. We already heard that a little bit, where it's like, oh, so you ta da 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 da, one of you did it, I can't remember when, but you actually repeated what your client said, exactly the same words, right? So that's one way of active listening, because you have heard their words, you have heard what they said, and you're repeating them. The second type, paraphrasing, is where you change the words slightly without, though, making assumptions, right? Without putting your own twist to it, but you're paraphrasing it slightly, which is, paraphrasing usually is better. I don't want to say better than repeating. It all depends, but repeating might sound too fake for the other person if you're doing it all the time. Like if you're constantly repeating, they're like, what is she doing? Right? Um but at times you might repeat one word. I do that at times. So you guys finish talking and then I repeat your a word you said, because I want to emphasize that I heard you in that you said it, and that I emphasize it for myself too. It's like I get it better when I say it, but I don't like repeat all the thing. I paraphrase more often. And the third one, reflecting, is my favorite. And reflecting is where you are really repeating the message but using your own words. And it's actually a whole separate skill. So it's the fifth skill, which we're gonna get to.